All right, we now welcome into episode 7 of the Nick Broeker Show, sponsored by the Young Alumni Collective. Big win for Ole Miss last week. The first kind of really highly anticipated game of the season. You guys played really well. Defense made some plays down the stretch. I know you played for 3 years in the SEC, but it kind of felt like it'd been a while since you guys have been in a game like that, just with how the schedule shook out. Just what was it like being in an environment like that again?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a while. I mean, like you said, last year we had some really cool games, but um, that was another one that was kind of wild. Fans were awesome. I thought the stadium was rocking, and it was really cool to see like the stripe out kind of come to life. I think everybody kind of was like, I wonder how that's gonna look. I thought it looked great, and so that was a really cool game to be a part of.
Yeah, people were fired the hell up for the game. That is for sure. I don't know if I was like skeptical of the stripe out. I just didn't quite understand what like the stripe out actually meant. But then I got in the stadium. I was like, no, this absolutely works. Like this was pretty cool. I thought the way they sold the whole game was awesome. And then of course the environment was just electric. And I know we talked about 11 a.m. games before, but does it change at all when it's an environment like that? Like, does it feel less 11 a.m. ish at all? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for us too, we kind of enjoy the 11 a.m. games a little bit from the standpoint of we practice in the morning. So it's not like we have to kind of change our body clocks because we always are always out on the field early and doing meetings. So from that standpoint of the 11 a.m. game, I don't think anybody's ever like, oh man, like we got to wake up at this time kind of deal. But like you said, I mean, for the fans to be out there and that fired up at 11 o'clock in the morning was really cool.
What did you make of Kentucky? Like, there's like, what was kind of perception versus reality from a defensive front, like on film versus what you saw in, when the game actually got started? They looked pretty stout and pretty physical defensively, but you guys kind of took it to them, particularly on the ground, for about 3.5 quarters of that game.
Yeah, I mean, what we saw in film was kind of what we anticipated from a schematic standpoint. Like they didn't really throw in anything that nothing of what we saw Saturday was anything that we weren't ready for, didn't really prepare for, so to speak. But like you said, like those guys were real big and physically, they played a good game too. So, it's kind of fun when you can get two really good teams on the same field together.
Yeah, for sure. And that was that to me. I know this sounds like generic, but that just looked like two really good football teams on the field, and you could
Mhm.
tell that immediately. I mean, I saw you briefly after the game, and you were talking about that was just kind of hard nosed football. Like when you get in a game like that, how early can you sense it? Because it was one of those things. It wasn't clearly it wasn't a shootout, but it was one of those things where it felt like you had to kind of fight for every yard.
Yeah, I mean, we could kind of tell early on with the film and everything that we knew it was going to be a game like that. We knew it was going to be a really good game, and we were going to have to play four really good quarters. But I mean, you could kind of tell early on that was going to be like that, especially because they bounced back. We were up 14-0 pretty early, and it seemed like they bounced back, then responded right away after we went up 14 and scored the touchdown themselves.
You guys had a little bit of reshuffling on the offensive line, right? Caleb was a little banged up. Y'all came out the first series, and Micah Pettis goes to right tackle. Jeremy slides in at guard. I know your side was pretty much intact, but just for like people at home that maybe don't understand what that changes, if anything, as an offensive line unit, what kind of changes for you personally or for just the unit as a whole when you kind of have to shuffle around like that and do something you're not necessarily accustomed to doing, at least not that point in the season?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I mean, for me, it wasn't anything that drastic. I guess instead of having Caleb next to me to start out the game for like a long period of the game, it was Eli, and I thought Eli did a really good job too. I thought all the guys did. Particularly guys who, like you said, Jeremy hadn't played guard in a long time, and he was kind of playing there. And Micah, that was his first game. He played really well. He played awesome. So, I'm sure there were some kinks for them that kind of felt odd at times, but for me and Jaden, we were pretty smooth sailing as far as this is what we always do.
And y'all ran the ball super well early in the game, right? Judkins breaks off a big one to score the second touchdown. Y'all ran it pretty much down the field, other than that one nice pass that Dart threw for the first drive. Setting the tone like that, I imagine, has to be one, obviously good on the scoreboard, right? You get started out fast, but just as an offensive line, when you're having that early type of success, how huge is that for you, just kind of the second and third quarters of the game? Because I imagine the defense gets pretty worn down.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it kind of wears him down. And I think, it's a big attitude thing. I've always been a big believer in running the ball. Not just only helps us on the offensive side of the ball, but also helps the defense. It kind of allows the defense to rest a little bit. And I think they can kind of feed off that too. If we're playing physical and running the ball well, it kind of amps them up to play well too.
when Pettis went in the game, you guys had two freshman tackles, and people talk. I mean, we talked a lot about on this podcast about like kind of maturity and like needing to kind of be seasoned as an offensive lineman. It's really one of the last places plug and play. I get each of those guys had a year to kind of get ready. They're redshirt freshmen, right? But I just was thinking, and I said this after in the post game, just like having two freshman tackles seems like a big deal, but I think it's kind of a testament to just how much he trusts both of those guys, right? To be able to throw both of them out there kind of on the edge, because obviously Jeremy James is a very capable tackle. You yourself played 3 years of SEC left tackle, but just do you think that's a reflection of kind of how Clements and the rest of the coaching staff feel about those guys?
Yeah, they've both prepared really well, and they've definitely, deserved to, be in that moment of playing. They've worked really hard, they've practiced really well, and they study the game well. So, it's really cool to see guys like that go in, but not only go in and play so well.
Yeah, and you were in a similar position in a way, except you didn't really have. I heard Pettis talking about after the game, and I think I've heard Williams talk about this as well, where like they got in, they didn't play immediately, they kind of knew they weren't ready to play, and they had a year to kind of reflect on why they weren't playing, as if it's some of it's just development, but like they said, they both kind of said they hit a point where it's like I kind of feel ready for this. You as a freshman didn't really have that. You just kind of had to be ready. But could you shed a little light on what they're talking about? Is this there's a way you feel physically when you're like, all right, I'm ready, I'm kind of equipped for this now? Like, is it a certain point, or does it kind of happen differently for each guy?
Yeah, I mean, even me playing as a freshman, I feel like during camp, like it took me through practices for me to kind of get my feet wet and be like, okay, like I can do this, and I think it's a big mindset thing because it's so much different, especially in the offensive line coming from high school to college, where in high school you can kind of just like for me, I was just kind of bigger than everybody. I played high school football against, obviously I was going to stand out doing that. And it was like always like the big thing was like, oh, what's it going to be like when he plays against, other Division I football players. So I think that's kind of like the main thing is you finally, you can kind of tell early, the guys are, older college football players, but there suddenly hits a point where you make a couple nice blocks, you kind of string along a couple of good practices where you finally feel like, you know what, I can do this. I am ready for this.
You kind of hit a little bit what I was going to get to in a second, and that's snapping and center. We talked about this before, right? I asked you like if you've ever tried to snap before. You mentioned doing it in practice a few times and then trying it in a scrimmage or two. That is an art, right? Or a learned trait, if you want to call it that, because as you pointed out a second ago, you don't really recruit centers, right? When you guys come out of high school, I mean, unless you're in some ridiculous powerhouse situation, all of you guys are playing tackle. And so I
Right.
know you haven't had to do it yourself, but what is kind of the adjustment of a guy coming out of high school? Obviously, he's a left or a right tackle where he plays high school, to having to play center and actually make that adjustment of hiking the football between your legs on a given play, because it's a huge part of the game, right? Football is a hugely complicated game, but if you're having trouble getting the ball back to the quarterback, that kind of throws everything else off. Like, what actually goes into learning how to do that and do that well? Because I mean, what, you play 75 snaps in a game, you better have 74 of them pretty good, because you can't afford like 5, 6 bad ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the heartbeat of it all is can't really get a play going if the operations timing's off or anything like that. Yeah, it's a tough thing, honestly. It's kind of like honestly for me, like learning how to snap at first it was really frustrating because I didn't really know how to, and everybody, and then obviously my offensive line coach, Coach Thornton's helping me. Like kind of this is how you need to grip it. This is when you need to release. So this is what your wrist should be like. So that's kind of tricky. I think the biggest adjustment for a lot of people coming from not playing center, especially at the college level, is just how much like you're kind of like the quarterback of the offensive line, if that makes sense. Like you're the one
Yeah.
that's kind of IDing the fronts and kind of gets the play started in most cases about this is what we're doing, this is what's going to happen, making all the calls. So, if you don't really have a smart center, somebody that's confident enough to make the calls, it can kind of, it can make things a little tricky, especially if the other guys are like, all right, what are we doing? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, for sure. And then like the actual snapping piece of it, I mean, this is going to sound like a dumb question, but is a shotgun snap harder than under center, like 100%?
Yeah, for me at least, I think under center is a lot easier than shotgun. I think a lot of people would attest to that. Like the under center is a lot easier.
What's like the geometry and the and like the, I was gonna say math behind it. I doubt you guys are like charting angles, but like the technique to it versus like, sometimes when you see a bad snap, it's high, sometimes it's low. I just pointed down when I said high and then up when I said low. But you get the picture. This is an audio only podcast. But like, what is the technique behind it? What kind of causes a high snap and a low snap?
A lot of it when it's high, at least from what I've experienced, sometimes it's like when you release the ball, and a lot of it too is like if you like raise your butt too much in your stance, that's kind of when a lot of high snaps happen. So you kind of have to keep a good relationship with like your knee bend and everything like that. Or sometimes when guys like what can throw it off too is they try to like if they're running a play, for example, and they're stepping to their right side, they won't like carry on like the way they snap the ball might keep going to the right because they're leaning, so then it'll go left. There's so many, which I didn't realize until I started practicing snapping like back in probably it kind of started as like honestly a joke. Like the ball was, I was like, oh, I'll just snap a few, and then during camp before practice, I would snap every now and again, and that's kind of mainly what it's been is just me snapping the ball like before practice because we have like all these quarterbacks, and we want to practice center quarterback snap exchange, so that's kind of what I do with it. But um, so just like little things like that, like you wouldn't really think about, can kind of really throw it off a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And then another thing I wanted to get to is we talked and written about this a lot this week. Is you guys are now 16-3 in your last 19 games. There's not a whole lot of programs in the country that are really in that mark, and you can frame it at 19, 20 games, whatever you want to do with it. You guys have won a lot of football games in the last 2.5 years, is the point of it. And you guys won another close one, and this time you pulled it out defensively at the end because your defense made two really, really big plays. But you guys kind of have a knack for winning these games. Y'all won a ton of close ones last year, right? The
Mhm.
Tennessee win was a terrific win. You won a close one against A&M with the big play at the end there. A couple throughout the year last year and even the year before that. It's funny walking through the Grove after the game. Ole Miss fans who I know you guys don't have like a 25-year history of like watching the Ole Miss like brand or whatever, but like I feel like older fans in particular are kind of like still getting used to it. But you can tell it's like a culture thing, right? You just eventually kind of start expecting to make plays and win games like that. The best you can describe, I know it's something that's probably pretty difficult to describe, but how does that happen? Like, how do you get, is it just being in that situation over and over again? How do you get to the point where you gotta just expect good things to happen and know, hey, we're going to make a play to win this thing instead of kind of, I guess, being paralyzed by the moment?
I think there's kind of two things. I think the first one is we've like you said, we've kind of been in that moment a lot, so we're a lot more experienced with it. Especially some of the older guys that have played a lot of football. And I think like the biggest thing is like we always say, you play to win, you don't play not to lose. If that makes sense, like you're
Yeah.
trying to make plays and not still attack the game like it's a normal game, not be back on your heels like, okay, well, if we let them catch it 8 yards, it's fine. That's kind of out the window now. We're still trying to make plays and playing like we're going to win the game, not like we're playing to not lose this game.
For sure. What was Jackson like throughout? I mean, he even admitted after the game that was the first kind of stage he'd been on like that. I know being at home when everyone's kind of in your favor is different than going on the road, but he had like a point where he was asked about it and he smiled and was just kind of talking about how much fun it was. Can you sense that at all during a game? I mean, imagine all of you guys are having fun in an environment like that, but just for a younger guy that hadn't really been in many situations like that, could you sense him kind of getting in a groove and getting to a point where he's like, all right, this is really awesome.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely tell with everybody. And Jackson, like you said, I thought he really rose to the occasion. I think that's just kind of the competitor in everybody, honestly. And that's kind of why you come to a school like Ole Miss and come play SEC football, so you can be a part of games like that. Honestly, that's kind of the way I look at it. It's kind of a privilege to be in games like this. It's super fun when the stadium's sold out and it's close and everybody's going crazy.
For sure. You guys had a ton of offensive success, particularly putting points on the board and finishing drives in the first half. I know it sputtered down a little bit in the second half, but you haven't been the beneficiary of this all 4 years you played. But how nice is it having a defense that you don't necessarily have to go out there and put out six every time? I understand that's the goal, but just kind of having that other side to lean on and a strength of the team being the defense versus in years past, 2020 in particular, you guys got into a bunch of shootouts. That was a weird year for a lot of reasons. Was it nice knowing that you have a little bit margin for error and when you come off the field, if a drive didn't go your way, there's a pretty good chance the other team's going to punt and you're going to get it right back with another shot?
Yeah, I think that takes a lot of pressure off us I think that's just kind of how you play team football because even when we punt and if we get a couple of yards and get a couple of first downs and punt and we pin them deep, we're going to get the ball right around our 50-yard line with a short field to work with. So, it's definitely something we really feed off of for sure.
Where were you when I say where were you? I know literally where you were. What was your reaction to the Ivy strip sack? Could you have topped Partridge's? I mean, really, that whole booth up there. I'm sure you saw that video.
Yeah.
What was your reaction? Are you stoic in those moments? Are you going nuts? How does that kind of work? What'd you do?
I just kind of like honestly like froze. Like I was so like excited but like so shocked. I was like, oh my goodness, like this is what it came down to. And then like kind of being an older guy, like guys are just running around the field. I was like, okay, well we still have to go out there and snap the ball. The game is like
That is
there's still
true.
58 seconds left. Like we can celebrate like in a minute.
What is a locker room at like after a win like that? I know it's hard to describe. There's probably not much topping it. I mean, you get the cigars when you beat Mississippi State. I've wandered halfway into a locker room one time when you guys had those fired off. That was maybe 17. But like, what is a locker room like after a win like that?
It's nuts. And that's kind of the best part is there's really nothing like the winning locker room, especially after a game like that. Everybody's going crazy, everybody's jumping around, dancing, maybe they'll put a little music on, and I mean, there's really no celebration like that.
What is your routine after a game like that? Because I know you have the whole day, not really like to yourself. I mean, obviously, I saw you after the game, you talk to your family, whatever, but I know you guys have a routine after, right, to take care of your body a little bit. Is that different at all for an 11 a.m. game? I know you want to try to be social some when you can, but what does that look like after an 11 a.m. game when you do have so much time left before, Sunday, the next day, whatever you guys have to do?
Yeah, I think like the biggest difference is like normally, because we've been playing a little later, like normally after those games, I'll just go back to my apartment and just kind of lay in bed the rest of the day. Honestly, like I went back to the Grove for a little bit, like you said, and hung out with my friends and some family there. And then after that, just kind of did the same thing, laid around all day and just got ready to go do treatment this Sunday. I think like the fun part about playing that early is because we play so early, we get done and we can kind of watch all the other games, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, because y'all don't get to watch hardly any football, right?
Mm-mm.
Unless you're playing
Yeah.
early or really late. Like any time in between that, what, like 11, I mean, after the 11 window, like that mid afternoon to early night, I mean, you're pretty much toast all day. I imagine you guys don't have the TV on watching leading up.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really watch any games, especially like 2:30, definitely not. 6:30, we might get like a little downtime in the afternoon to watch in our hotel rooms while we're waiting around. But 11 o'clock for as far as us watching games, 11 o'clock is probably the most ideal situation for that.
You guys have mentioned a couple of times had another huge week running the football. I think probably the one that stands out is Q breaking loose for that second touchdown. There was some like sports science deal where he reached like 22 miles an hour. Apparently, a cheetah can run that fast. I'd like to see that for myself. Maybe they could race. I don't know. But like when you're on the field and he breaks it in the second level like that, you're like, damn, he's fast. Like I know you're not surprised by how quick he is, but just seeing it go that quickly to, gets past the linebacker and then no one's really going to touch him after that. Is it still kind of mesmerizing to see while you're watching it in real time?
Yeah, with all of them, honestly. And Q was obviously the example because he was the one who broke it off last week. But there's plenty of examples of guys running down the field, whether it's offense, defense, special teams. They're like, geez, like that guy's rolling. Like, like
Yeah.
even I think it was Ishim Young on when Kentucky hit that big play on their last drive before Ivy had the strip sack. He came like all the way across the field, and I was like, he is because they showed it to us, and I was like, dude, he is rolling right now. Like he is digging right now.
What does Kiffin say to you guys after a win like that? Because I know, particularly offensively, it probably didn't necessarily go the way y'all wanted to. But again, that's why it's team and complementary football. But that win where you won, make enough plays to win, but a close one where, kind of in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, we kind of escaped that. What does he tell you after a win like that?
Yeah, I think like you said, I mean, there's obviously always good and bad within every game, and just winning a game like that, it's awesome. And so that was like kind of, his message to us, it's good to celebrate, but don't celebrate for too long because we have another game coming up. So, celebrate now, but once we come back tomorrow, we have another game to play.
For sure. And you guys go to Vanderbilt this week. I was looking it up earlier based on when you got in. You got into school. That is, you've never played at Vanderbilt in like a normal setting. Not that it's much different than the COVID year. No offense to Vanderbilt, but like you've never actually the way the schedule's played out. You've never played there in like a normal environment, right? Because they were here in 19, weren't they? And then
Yeah,
20
and there's a
COVID
few
year.
schools like that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few schools like that. I think we played at LSU, Arkansas. We didn't play A&M at all in COVID year. So those are all places that we didn't in Vanderbilt, obviously, like you said, are all places we haven't got to play at during like a true normal season. So yeah, it'll be fun to there when there's actually fans and everything. No, you're good.
So for a week like this, I know Vanderbilt, another SEC opponent, they're much better this year than they've been in years past. Like I've watched them a couple of times. They have a
Mhm.
lot more like real SEC talent than I think in years past. But you're also not going to walk into kind of what you've talked about a couple of times. You enjoy a raucous environment. It will be a lot of Ole Miss people. There will be some sparsely populated, gold and black. It's an older stadium. It's a different environment, if we're being honest, than the rest of the SEC. Do you have to kind of mentally lock in a little bit more? I know we talked about a little bit this against Georgia Tech, but are you conscious of that at all versus, I mean, look, if you have to get fired up to go play in Death Valley, like you're probably in the wrong sport. Do you have to kind of monitor that at all?
Not really. I think anytime you get the chance to play an SEC game, especially an SEC road game, you're kind of fired up for it just because it's it's just kind of what you're here for. You know, you're here for the SEC games. You're here for these big time games. So they're still SEC players too, just like we are at the end of the day. So, um, and we know, Vanderbilt and Ole Miss kind of have like that's our crossover game. Like that's who we play every year. So definitely one we want to play well in.
For sure. As you guys wade deeper into the season, can you sense Jackson getting more comfortable and more confident? He just the last three games, look, the stat sheet, it doesn't really tell the true story, I don't think, with him in pretty much any game you guys have played so far. But you can tell in the last three games, he seems more decisive, like deliberate with what he's doing with the football. I know he's confident, I know he's a leader, but can you guys sense him getting more comfortable as you guys get further and further into the season and he gets more snaps under his belt?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, he's super talented and can make all the throws, but now he has um, more comfortability, and he's been with us for a few games now at this point, so he definitely can kind of sense that, and he's done a really good job.
Kind of wrapping up, you guys have a huge stretch of games coming up in front of you, and that was the first one. I know we've talked about this a couple of times. You take it week by week, but was there ever a moment after the Kentucky game, after a huge physical game like that, you're like, "I damn, we got seven more of these." Like the road's just kind of beginning.
Yeah, definitely. It's something you kind of think about after the game. Yeah, it's like murderers row, all the SEC games.
It really is. It's why it's the greatest conference in the world and the toughest conference in the world. And I imagine, I mean, you mentioned that's why you come to the SEC, right? You imagine you guys wouldn't have it any other way. Look, if we're being frank about this, I mean, if you go to some other schools, you may get 2, 3 games a year tops, like that Kentucky game where you guys sign up and you pretty much guaranteed 8 a year plus whoever you're playing non-conference. Like that really is why you guys come to play in the SEC, is it not?
Yeah, definitely. We want to compete against the best, and I think anybody who's like a competitor, and everybody in this league is, that's what you want to do. You want to play against the best people and playing these types of games, playing these types of atmospheres.
Do y'all bus anywhere? You're flying to Nashville, right? That's a little pond jump of a flight, but y'all aren't busing anywhere but like Starkville, right?
I think we actually are busing in Nashville. I can't
Okay.
remember. At least last time we did. I'm pretty sure we're busing. Other than that, like I think our only since I've been here, the only games we've bused to have been to Nashville, Starkville, like you said, and we'll drive to Tuscaloosa because that's only like I think maybe 3 hours bus.
Yeah. Yeah. And y'all do Birmingham the night before, sometimes in Tuscaloosa, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I remember that from when I was in house. What do you do on a bus ride? Like when you actually have a real length amount of time, like what do you movie? Do you do podcast? What's kind of your go-to?
For a buster like that, kind of all of the above. Like I'll probably download something on Netflix to watch, and then other than that, listen to music, listen to podcasts, just play around on my phone, things like that.
How do they let you guys, nervous energy isn't the right word, but when you go from bus and you're there on a Friday night, and then obviously, I mean, you have meetings and stuff, but it really is just kind of the hotel room. What do they let you guys kind of do? I know some of it's probably game time dependent, but kind of blow off some steam and kind of get somewhat active before a game like that.
Yeah, so we normally wrap up meetings and we have like a good little period, like hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, something like that, before bed where we can kind of hang out in each other's rooms and what maybe there's it always feels like there's like a Friday night college football game on that
Yeah.
we might turn on, but other than that, not a whole lot. Like everybody's kind of different. I like to like get a little stretch in from one of the trainers or one of the strength coaches Friday night. But other than that, I'll just kind of hang out in my room and watch whatever's on TV.
Do y'all have any game console guys that are just bringing the Xbox, PS? I don't even actually know what model PlayStation is out anymore. Are there game dudes that bring PS5? There we go. I think I'm still rocking with the 3. I haven't dusted that off in like a decade. But like, are there dudes that bring video games? What is that kind of like?
Yeah, there's a few I think, but I'm not sure. I don't. That's not like my thing. I don't really game a whole lot. Like I'll game every now and again with some of my friends from home, but I'm not a huge gamer like that. So it's not something I'm like looking for either.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are some guys. I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, you've kind of missed your window. I'm not a huge gamer myself. I suck at Call of Duty and Fortnite and all that. I probably gave each of them like a 3-week trial run during COVID. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me, which is probably a good habit I didn't pick up because I already probably procrastinated enough. But like, I imagine you got the college football game coming back next year. You could have just done the all dynasty in the hotel room, Broeker at quarterback, Broeker at
Mhm.
center, Broeker at running back. Like, you're kind of 1 year away. You missed your window a bit because I hear that game's coming back next year.
That's the rumor I've heard as well. So I'm hoping that's true because that was like what we grew up on.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I loved playing that game as a kid, and then all of a sudden it went away, and I was like, "Damn, that's probably the last time I turned on the PS3 because I just don't have much." Like again, I don't get into like the war games and all that. That's pretty much all I had going for me. So, a shame you missed it by a year, but hey, when you're playing wherever you're playing next year, you can just throw it on and just go broker all dynasty mode, Heisman Trophy, the whole ball of wax.
Mhm.
Last thing for you before we wrap up here, just as you get 5 games into this season, I know you guys know you're pretty good. I know you guys know there's talent in the room, but you get a huge SEC win like that. Everything is out in front of you. Like everything you want to attain is right there for the taking, particularly with the way the league's set up this year. I know it's probably not something you don't talk about every day, but can you sense that it's understood against amongst all those guys that everything you want to accomplish is kind of right there?
Yeah, I think it's something we even talked about before the season that we have a lot of talent, a lot of really good players, so we could really have a special season. So that's something we're definitely working for.
He is Nick Broeker. I enjoy doing this every week, man. Hell of a game last week. That was awesome to watch you guys win in the fashion that you did. Best of luck next or this coming weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you a ton. I appreciate it.